Well, hi, everybody. My name is Chris Ann Hazen. I am moderating this panel. The panel is Pedagogy Deep Dive, Externship Design. Couple of quick announcements. This session is being recorded. So if you're more comfortable with your video off, that's totally fine. We will be saving the chat. Also, please mute yourselves unless you're asking a question. A quick reminder that the final small group sessions will begin at 12:15 Eastern today. Materials for this session will be on the Google Drive we've been handing out all week, the link to, and I will put it in the chat in a moment. And then lastly, the session is intended to be interactive, especially with a smaller group. So if you want to ask a question, please just put it into the chat and we may call on you midstream, or we might wait until the end of the hour. So I am gonna stop sharing and introduce our speakers. Let me just do this really quickly. Okay. So Amanda Rivas is the Director of Externships at St. Mary's University School of Law. She is the newly elected AALS Externship Committee Co-Chair and a 10-year externship veteran. Sue Schechter is the Field Placement Director and Lecturer in Residence at UC Berkeley School of Law. She has been active in regional and national externships work for, quote, a long time. She currently sits on the AALS Clinical Executive Committee and as a liaison on several AALS externship sections. And she is the current chair of the AALS Pro Bono and Public Service Opportunities section. So I will just add my 2 cents, which is that these are 2 of the most expert externship people you could have in teaching this class, and to get to know them if you don't already. And I will stop there and let Amanda take it away.
Thank you, Chris Ann. Welcome, everyone. And we just wanted to spend a little bit of time going into a little bit more about ourselves beyond, our titles. Yes, I'm Director of Externship, but I actually went to law school here at St. Mary's. And it's in San Antonio. If you've never been to Texas, that's sort of, most people think of it as South Texas, but it's mid-Texas. And there's still a good 4 hours south before you hit the Mexican border. And that's where I was born and raised, in deep South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. So I went away to college in Boston, and I feel like I truly appreciated where I was from, my culture, my language there. And I am super excited to have started my teaching career, actually teaching middle school. And I'm currently married to a middle school teacher, and I have 2 toddlers. So the balance game is, I'm trying to get strong at this, but we'll see. So that's a little bit more about myself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sue Schechter. I direct the field placement program at Berkeley Law, and this July I'll be there 15 years, which I can't believe. Feels like a couple of years ago, but I have been in legal education almost 30. I worked at Golden Gate Law School before, so feel proud to have worked with 2 such wonderful law schools in my career. And it's my full-time job doing externships, but I also help to promote, support all public interest and pro bono things at my law school, and then other ways. And my program, just FYIs, we have about 60 to 80 students a semester who do field placements. We only allow nonprofits and government agencies. My faculty has reconsidered that 3 times since I've been there, so happy to share that with anyone. And this semester I did have a record number of students because they didn't want to sit in front of Zoom for 5 classes. And the other thing that was really lovely is that many of them said they felt like they needed to make a contribution to the world. So that was a really lovely moment. And Amanda and I'll go more into kind of how our programs work and decisions we made.
Yeah, and I will talk a little bit more about my program as we go through and interject when Sue has some sections on the ABA and we go through there. So you'll get to know a little bit more about me. Okay, so let's start this. So welcome, everyone. We're really excited to have you. We're going to do a little poll right now. Chris Ann will We want to get to know a little bit more about you as much as we can, right? With the Zoom room full of people. We want to know how long you've been an externship clinician. What's your role as an externship clinician, right? Thinking about these things. So take some time to fill that out. I'll keep going on the roadmap. We're going to go through some resources together. We want to give you some resources to ensure that you have a good sort of community of places to go to. Go through the ABA standards and how they play a role in program considerations. Support and status issues we want to talk about briefly, and then finally bring it all home and maybe spend some time answering your questions. Okay. I think that's pretty good. I think we have most people voting. I want to see and share the results. Okay, good. Yeah, the both. I think we can definitely all relate to that. Your role as an externship is doing a lot of different things at once. A lot of us are juggling. Great. Okay. So moving on. So if you've just joined the externship field or you've been here for a little bit of time, you've probably heard of the AALS, the Association of American Law Schools. Really has a section on clinical legal education, and they have an externship committee. So one of the great resources is a clinician's desk reference. If you haven't been on Lexterm, we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that later, but it is on there. It is great. It's helpful. The externship committee, that's the one that Chris Ann talked about recently. I was elected as co-chair. Super excited. There's so many robust subcommittees there. There's a think tank and repository for anti-racism, membership, and new member support. That's where Sue and I were both in that committee together. So if you're new and you haven't touched base with us, please reach out. The teaching methodologies, scholarship, communications, and Lexturn. So if you're interested in sort of online website design, I know Kendall would love to have you sort of work with her. International and semester away, also a very active subcommittee. We have monthly Friday virtual learning sessions that we've been all leaning on during this time period in the pandemic in the last year. We're going to keep that up, and we'd love for you to stop in. Make sure that you know how to get a hold of us through our listserv, which we'll tell you about in a second. And we really focus on some mentorship, which I'll go into in a second, and some of those programs. But CLIA is the other organization. It's really, there's a lot of advocating coming out of this organization for clinicians. The new clinician handbook is a great resource that they have also on Lexturn, and they also have an externship committee. And then there's CSAIL. If you haven't heard of CSAIL, the Center for the Study of Applied Legal Education, it really is this robust survey that gives a lot of data. The results from the latest survey of the 2019 to 2020 survey results. If you ever think about your program and want to know who else is doing this, who else has done this, you know, I'm thinking about expanding all of these potential, you know, how many people have paid, how many people are doing nonprofits, how many people are doing private, you know, all of that information you can find on CSAIL, on Lexturn, or there's the website directly. It's so helpful. If you haven't had a chance to just go through it, it can be really great, especially in terms of getting to know where you stand and what other people are doing, and maybe putting together some data as you advocate for your own program and talk to administration about things. So I've mentioned a lot of these are online. Lexturn Web, a lot of them are on Lexturn Web. That's the website. If you haven't been there, please take a second to go through and watch how many resources our community shares with each other. You can find teaching syllabi examples, you can find supervisor training, manuals, webinars, written agreement examples, right? Some of the best practices. There's a lot of COVID-19 material that we were sharing last year. They're still on there if you're thinking about adjusting, right? You want to compare. Directories, consortium information, and scholarship support is also on there. I can't emphasize how helpful Lexturn Web has been. I mentioned the listservs. I know you've probably heard a little about this. So if you you can decide, I know I'm on the externship listserv, and then I co-teach our Dean of Clinics. She's on the clinic listserv, and we kind of share what's important with each other. If you're balancing a lot, being on both can be overwhelming. So come up with systems for your email to do that. That's the only tip I'll give you there, is think about how you might want to manage that, because there's so many great information, announcements, things that are being shared and asked. You don't want to miss things. And finally, we do have a textbook that's been put together. We have 2 editions at this point of Learning from Practice. It's available online. You can assign it. You can assign portions of it. This is a great part of this too, is that you can sort of have individual chapters and assign individual chapters for your students. Wonderful activities, resources. The teacher's manual for me has been super helpful. So please take a second to kind of explore that option. We also have a robust and very welcoming, I don't say that just because I was on the welcoming committee, but very welcoming, generous community. I think there's a lot of us here who are a part of that community that are nodding their heads and saying that it's true, confirming. We do have conferences. It's a great place to kind of connect with one another. It's hosted by individual schools every 2 years, is the Externship Conference. And we just announced that our next one is Externship 11. That's February 18th through the 20th in 2022. It's a partnership with UCLA and Pepperdine. We're so excited to be able to get together in person, hopefully next February, and do that together. The Debelayel section on clinical education, that's an annual conference. And CLIA, of course, has the annual New Clinicians Conference. So prior to today, I think we've done this in a row. There's also regional conferences. So depending on where you are, thinking about getting connected with your consortiums, if there are none. I'm in Texas, we don't have a consortium, but I do have all the other externship directors kind of in a list in my email, and I connect with them regularly. So think about regional conferences if there are there. I mentioned mentorship is a big part of what we like to do in the externship community. We have some formal programs. The Clinicians Helping Hand Project is one through CLIA, but we also have the Clinician Cruise. That's a AALS project coming out of the membership outreach and training. It's been wildly successful. We did the second semester this spring. It's just a really great chance to connect with a small group of externship directors, at least in the externship field. And I know I'm leading a crew for the first time, and it was wonderful to get to know them, to see, how much there was sharing going back and forth, and just sometimes knowing that you're not alone. So it's helpful, and brainstorming and having a sounding board. For me, I'm the only one who does this full time at my school, so it's been a really great resource for me. So if there aren't any pertinent questions that you want me to ask now, we can hand it over to Sue.
I don't see any, so go ahead, Sue.
Great, thanks, Christiane. And thank you, Naya, for your kind words. I think of you and Robbie and a couple of others out there as being around now for a while. So ABA standard. So now we're going to do the dive into the fun stuff. So it's been an interesting evolution of externships through the ABA standards. And if anyone really cares to read about the last 20 or 30 years, Peter Joy wrote a great piece that I recommend. If you just Google him, or it's Peter Joy, J-O-Y, at WashU. And it's about kind of the evolution of the standards that apply to us. But the 4 that we wanted to bring to your attention here are 302 learning outcomes. And learning outcomes are a thing that kind of came up in the ABA years, 10 years ago or so. So every law school is supposed to have learning outcomes. Some schools took it seriously. Some schools just put something together. It is a jumping off point, but it's not the be all and end all. And then I know that some schools, people get very uptight about worrying about whether their program, their externship program meets all of 302. And if you're asking that, you're probably fine. But happy to talk more with anyone about that. 303 is about a curriculum, and thanks, Amanda. And 303 is about experiential learning. And 303, as some of you may know, is right now going through a re-envisioning. So the comment period, I believe, is opening in June. And they're going to be likely adding 2 components to it. One is about professional identity, and another is about teaching anti-racism, bias, and cultural competency. And it will be very interesting to see how 303 transforms and then what our role will be in that. For beginners, that's probably all you need to know. But if you kind of stay awake at night thinking about this stuff, happy to talk more. And then the one that you should probably memorize before the first day of class or whatever is 304, and it's 304D. It's really kind of the step-by-step guide of how to run a field placement program. Field placement course provides substantial lawyering experience, talks about supervision, written understanding, really takes you through, like, I can't tell you how many times I go back to this in a week or month or whatever. And then finally 310, because I know some of you are probably like, I inherited this program and I don't know how we got the number of hours for units. So this is the determination. There was a memo put out a few years back. And now I believe now it's in the interpretation that basically for all courses, it's 42.5 hours is the minimum, is the floor. Many law schools will go over. The last externship survey we did, we found programs between 42.5 and 60 hours per credit. And happy again to talk more about that. So we can go to the next slide. What we thought we would spend the bulk of today talking about is just kind of the things you're probably thinking about as you're working on your programs and thinking about them. And most of you inherited something. And I want to start by saying, to me, having done this work for 105 years, there are two guiding principles. One is, who are you? Like, why are you doing this? Right? Like, and I mean you, I mean Amanda, I mean Robbie, I mean Dan. Like, why are you teaching in externships? Like, every time you get frustrated around the bureaucracy, the administration, the hierarchy, just kind of step yourself back and say, why am I doing this? Like, what's my, and we all have different reasons, but I just want to urge you to stay kind of in that. And then the second thing, and I've learned this again and again and again, mostly through my teaching, but also through my administering, that less is more, less is deeper, and less is better. And I just can't tell you how many externship people I talk who've been doing this more than 10 years. And they're just telling me, I threw that section out of my syllabus. I threw it out. And I think you're going to find you're going to appreciate it. The students are going to appreciate it. And you're just going to get a lot more out of it. So what we want to talk with you about is kind of the teaching reflective component, the time, the placement, supervisors. We know this is an hour, right? Now we've even got like a half hour. We are just going to throw out some kind of topics, some big things, and then, you know, happy to talk more, but just want to get these in your brain to be thinking about. You can go to the next slide. So the teaching reflective component, as 304 tells us, we are all required to have a contemporaneous reflective component. So when you start thinking about your teaching, you know, why are you teaching? What do you want to teach? And then we can go to the next slide. So, because it'll go to this. So when you think about your learning incomes, why are you teaching? Like, what do you want to include in there? Like, I can tell you, and for those of you who know me, I am not going to teach you about lawyering skills. Like, it is not, I am not going to teach you how to be a lawyer. I was a mental health patients' rights advocate for 1 year. I can tell you a lot about schizophrenia and bipolar, but I can't tell you a lot about like client counseling and negotiation. But so what I feel like the value I bring to my students is, you know, kind of the who are you, the vulnerability, the courage, the like, why are you doing this? Let's dig deep into that. And then also I always spend at least one class on authenticity and reflection. Like, you need to be you when you show up to be a lawyer. Amanda, did you want to throw in anything here? You're muted.
Yeah. I spend more time, I think I would say, on the self-directed learning skills and this idea of the vision of who they want to be when they're practicing law, and not necessarily just what they want to practice. And so that self-awareness definitely comes in. I do spend some time too in that authenticity and reflection, but I push that network and support building a lot in my class, and I throw them into groups whenever I get a chance, and I'm telling them to reach out to each other, reach out to other people in their placements, and learning how to reach out and communicate even just once with us as the teachers is a really big part of that.
One thing a lot of our colleagues do is they kind of look around their curriculums and they see what's not being taught. Like, what is someone not talking about? So Neera Givargis, who is co-chairing the National Externship Committee with Amanda, we are very lucky. She spends a whole class on salary negotiations, timesheets, like just kind of like I would call the more nuts and bolts stuff. And, really why she does that is when she looked around Hastings, she was at UC Hastings, she didn't see that being taught to students. And she felt like it was a really important, powerful thing for students to leave feeling more comfortable and competent around. She actually ties it in with her anti-racism class, and it's a fascinating presentation, which I know she'll do for the externship committee sometime this year. We can go to the next slide.
Oh, yeah, we talk about all these things. So,
okay. So again, the number of hours you're going to meet, if you're going to have a class component, the number of hours you're going to meet, the number of field work hours. So, and hopefully this makes some sense to you. So you have the field work component, and that's kind of that's the kind of substance of what we're all doing in the externship world. And then you have the reflective component, and you can do that in a class component. You can do it as, journaling. There's lots of ways to do it. Most of us would tell you that the classroom is best practice to be able to get students into a class. Then the issue comes up, well, do I separately credit that class, right? So it's 42.5 hours for one unit. Where does the class component fit in? Is that a separate unit? Is that a unit that's part of those hours? There are no right answers, wrong answers, right? Well, there are probably some wrong answers, but there are no right answers. So you're going to need to talk to a couple of people, see what works in your law school. I inherited a program that mostly had the classroom component built in. And over the last, I'll say 10 years or so, I've been taking it out and making it a separate unit. And I'm happy to tell you my reasons for that, but just I felt it made sense in my program. And then again, you want to think about the fieldwork hours, what counts. I want to give you one little idea. We started doing, again, much credit to Neera, out in California, some of the schools, I take 10 hours out of my fieldwork hours every semester to allow students to do anti-racism reading. I have them reported on their timesheets, and it has been a great addition. It's really, this is a moment we all need to be reading, thinking, talking, being, doing. So really want to encourage my students to be in that dialogue. And then again, how are those hours going to count? We can go to the next slide.
I just want to interject really quickly that I have a combined, I was inherited too. And so we do 50 hours per credit hour in the field placement, and then an additional 15 to 20 curriculum. I only meet as a class, a whole class twice. And then we have some small groups that the students get to choose. They have to do at least 2 in a semester of small groups. Then there's other work that's done on Canvas that's reflected in guided reflections, discussions, things like that, interactions with us and one-on-ones. But it is a balance, I will say, trying to, that 50 hours per credit hour in the field placement part, and then the curriculum part, and trying not to have the students feel overwhelmed by all of it put together, right? I say it's a very heavy 3-credit course.
You'll hear that. They'll tell you, well, I don't do this much work in my other classes or whatever. And you just have to kind of shrug a little bit and say, well, I mean, everyone is supposed to be doing 3 to 4 hours outside of their classroom time for every class. Whether they do that or not, we don't know. So these are my 3 next favorite parts. One is who's teaching this, and then don't go to it yet, but placements, where students going, and then the supervision piece. So for teachers, so who's teaching? Are you going to teach? And 58% of us. Oh, thank you, Rosalba. Thanks. And if people want to throw in the chat how they break theirs out, that's great. So for the teaching part, some of us really came to this because we wanted to be teachers, right? That is what keeps us awake at night, teaching, teaching, teaching. That's cool. Then you want to build your program so you are the main teacher or a big teacher or whatever in your program. Some of us want to do the teaching, but don't want it to be the only thing we're doing. So they do teaching as part of it. They bring in lecturers to help. With 60 to 80 students a semester, I bring in 5, 6 lecturers who help me with different components of my program. I have a civil, a criminal, a judicial, I have a program for repeaters, basically. It's called just a, it's a field placement workshop, 1-unit reflection. And then I have an away program, bring in lecturers to help me with those. And then you want to be thoughtful about who your lecturers are. For my work, I try to look to good supervisors. Who's a really great supervisor who I think can really add something in the classroom. You might want to think about, you know what, I really love this professor faculty, and I'd love to see if I can get them to take a unit and teach a class. But you want to be really thoughtful, and then you want to support those lecturers, right? Becky Rosenfeld, Ravi's predecessor at Cardozo, wrote a great piece. It's probably the seminal piece about how do you work with lecturers and how important they are. We call lecturers adjuncts, whatever you call them. If they're going to do the teaching, then they really need to understand your pedagogy and your goals, and you need to support them. Amanda, do you have anything to add?
No, well, yes, I do. Okay. And then I talk. I say no, and then I talk. So yeah, I co-teach with our director of clinical education, and we're able to sort of split that up, and I have an admin. We don't have a huge class. We didn't when we started, but we have been growing over the last 10 years. And I think we're getting to a point where it's not enough. We don't have enough resources for us to all sort of do what we need to do. And I've been thinking about adding faculty and adjuncts, and going through this. All the things that Sue said have definitely been things that I've been thinking about. But I think one of the best advice that I would give is just build that relationship early with whoever it might be, and do as many touch points as you can, and really ask those hard questions about, what you think, if their faculty, get student input on, how the students react to them, and why they might be a good sort of fit for externship. If they're out practitioners, really, talk to the people that they work with too. When I hear people that I work with talk about their philosophy for teaching and why they do what they do, it really does make a connection with me more than other things in their resume.
Great, thanks. And I can tell you, I hired a public defender to teach my criminal course, and I actually called a couple of DAs to say, what do you think of this, a public defender? And they all said, we love her and we hate her. And I thought it was a lovely way to, we hate when we have to face her in court, but we love her as a human being. And I thought, well, that's a great sign, because my criminal class has both public defenders and DAs. We don't have a lot of DAs at Berkeley, but we do have some. Okay, so then let's go to placements. So placements. So this is a critical component as well. Like, where are your students where they're gonna do this field work, and how are they gonna get there? So are they student generated? Do they come up with their own ideas? Do you have a list? Are you going to assign them? I've been talking to a lot of people over the last few years who inherited a program that, like, you can work at these 12 places because those are places you vetted, you feel comfortable with, you whatever. And, like, maybe fine. I do think it might quell a little of the creativity on the students. Plus, I also think part of this process is the students really, really digging deep to think about where do they want to be, and who are they, and why does it make sense? So I think if they just go to this, buffet line and pick out something, I'm not sure, again, goal in my program is for them to kind of figure out who they are. You can put the little box up with it. And then recruitment and eligibility. As everyone knows now, the ABA does allow paid externships. I was one of the people who thought the sky was going to fall when that happened. And I did a lot of work fighting back against paid, not because I don't want students to be paid, mostly because I didn't feel like a $3,000 job was going to make a lot of difference in a $150,000 loan burden. And I worried that it would be a way to say we were doing something about debt burden when we're really, it does not impact it greatly. But the sky has not fallen. And I think you will find there's still a good number of schools that do not allow pay. My school has considered it, and so far we do not allow pay. We are creative about reasonable compensation. Like, a student can get paid for travel, they can get paid for parking, they can get paid for, if they're doing an away placement, for travel to it. So we try to be creative to help the students. And then again, right, in terms of placements, we only do nonprofits, government agencies. When I was at Golden Gate, we did for-profits, law firms. And I have to say that was probably where I spent most of my time and effort, because you want to just be, it's not like all government placements are amazing, but with for-profits, you want to make sure the student isn't just answering the phone. The student, you know, you really want to make sure what's the educational value they are paying for these, you know, tuition dollars. What is the student getting out of this? Yeah, so I'll leave it there for placements, but definitely be thoughtful about the placement part.
And I would say spend some time thinking about the resources. It's listed there, but the way we do it, just the way it was set up for us, we didn't have a lot of resources. I was the only one doing this full time. So student generated work for us. I call it BYOO, bring your own opportunity. But we do have some approved sections. So there could be kind of making it work for you type of thing. We do allow compensation, so feel free. And we do have in-house counsel. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer that.
So the next slide, supervisors. This is the issue nearest and dearest to my heart. I do not think we do nearly enough to support, to teach, to push our supervisors. Our supervisors are our teachers, and there's different schools of thought. There are some people who feel like I'm focused on the students, student learning, student directed, student. I love that. It's great. I would say I try to be there. But I also have learned over the last, you know, decade or so, my supervisors are my buddies. They are my, you know, you can be in a crappy placement, but if you have a great supervisor, you are going to have a good experience. For supervisors, you want to really think about how you're recruiting them, you're vetting them, you're training them. I can tell you, I call every supervisor every semester. So this semester, you know, I'm calling federal judge clerks who I've been working with for 10 years because we have a lot of career clerks here in Northern California. They're like, why are you calling me, Sue? And I'm like, because it's a different moment, right? Like, how are you doing remote? What does that look like? Here's Berkeley's requirements. I guarantee, please, you should not feel like you're being a pain. You should not feel like you're taking up their time. Your students are worth it. And a student after student will tell you, you know, after you made that call, after you had that contact, I got better work. You know, I got better this, I got better that. And obviously with these supervisors, you want to do something that welcomes, orients them. This is how we run our program. Send them your packet. BASE, the Bay Area Consortium on Externships, has a supervising attorney manual that we're happy to share with everybody. You should, I think Brittany I saw might have been on the call. Brittany was one of the main authors of it from UC Hastings. And you know, please, you're welcome to take it, use it, make it work for you. Have ongoing communication, right? You send them something at the beginning of the semester. Hey, then you might want to touch base 2 weeks in. Hey, just touching base. How are things going? Any issues, any problems? They're generally not going to reach out to you to let you know. There's like, hey, John didn't show up on Tuesday and I don't know what happened. And then I do an interim, I do a self-assessment, the students do it, but I use that to jump off into my site visits, and I am doing remote site visits. So I do site visits. I'm a big site visit fan. I know that some people are like, I don't have time, but for me, that's one of the things I love about my job is I'd say I'm 70% in my building and I'm 30% out in the field. Like what's happening, what are trends, how are you working with students? I am always connecting supervisors to supervisors. So always saying, hey, Lisa at ACLU, would you be willing to talk to Mary at Legal Services to tell her how you run your program or what you do about this? So I'm always kind of connecting folks. A couple other things we do in the Bay Area is we have pulled together a Northern California public defender intern coordinator group because we have 8-10 counties right around us. We and actually now we've kind of brought in some folks from Nevada and very far out in California. We do every few months we do a call. How are you working with students? What are you doing? I don't do the CDO piece, career development, career services, but I love that I invite my career services people and, you know, they're like, how are you hiring? How many are you hiring? And all the law school externship people can then take that back to their schools. And then showing appreciation. This was on Lextern a few months ago. Dina Bauman brought this up and got some good ideas. But we're going to start doing some stuff from our program when people have been supervising for 3 semesters. So for a year and a half, we're going to be sending them a letter signed hopefully by our dean, just thanking them for kind of maintaining. Remote supervision is hard work, right? And I'm assuming you're doing remote, but yes, whoever's doing that from my phone too. I think it's on Lexturn, but if you want to just put your name and email in the chat, we'll go ahead and send it. But show appreciation, whatever that might be. When I go on site visits, I literally bought like a bunch of those, reusable shopping bags that said Berkeley Law on them, and I give them out like, hey, thought you could use another bag. Or, we gave Post-its, like Base had these Post-its made up that said, what did it say? Got feedback, or, feedback ? And, when we went on site visits, we would leave that with supervisors. So I'm not so into like promoting Berkeley. That's not my big thing. My big thing is like, how do we get them to care about our students? How do we get them to give feedback? So, yeah. So then, again, as we're noting, who are your supervisors? Where are they? How do you communicate with them? Are all really important. Anything more on that, Amanda?
Yeah, so I will say that twice a year I host a CLE, and that's my chance to get our supervisors together. It's not required, it's voluntary, but I try and do it at lunch, and I've been doing it over Zoom. So it's kind of easy for them. I tell them, come and eat lunch with us, right? And then I go over some strategies, share some things, and sometimes have them, this one in particular that's coming up, I put them in a little breakout groups and kind of discuss certain issues that have come up or strategies they have. I also put together a lot of templates for them, feedback templates, assignment templates, and I have that as resources for them. I will say the consortiums out in California have been great in terms of providing the material. Sue was talking about her manuals out there, and the training material is out there, is recorded, that you can get that off of Lexturn. I've taken that, modified it, made my own training, kind of addressing some of the things that might be more specific to our regions, condensing it, because that's one of the feedbacks that I've gotten from supervisors before, is they want, kind of something short and quick and helpful. And so you can kind of cut it up or put your own together. And that's what I've done for a lot of the resources that I've gotten from Lexturn. It's been amazing. And we split up the work just to think about the resources part. So I do the initial contact in the beginning, sort of welcoming them, making sure I know them, vet them, recruit them, and make sure they're ready to go to start the semester. I co-teach with the Dean of Clinical Education. She does the midterm site check-ins. And so she gets to know them there, and sort of we come back and talk about some things. And if there's any adjustments that need to be made before the end of the semester, or as we think about them for the next semester, we have that conversation.
I'm going to pass it back to Amanda to talk about assessment. And before I do, the one thing I want to say is please don't reinvent wheels. Like, we're all doing this. We're all borrowing from each other. We're all crediting each other. We're all, no one's in this for the power and the glory. So just use what we've done. Let us know, send back what you did so we can see how you improved it. And yes, and every year, supervising attorney trainings are wonderful. California, Northern California does them, Southern California, New York, DC. So it's really, that's something. Work with your neighbors, especially now that we're in Zoom world. It's easy enough for students to come on. And I'll leave with one last thing is we're going to be doing something hopefully in June out in the Bay Area. We're going to have a conversation with supervising attorneys, thinking about your fall program, wondering what hybrid looks like. Are you thinking remote, in person? We're just going to pull together, invite, a couple hundred, we'll probably get 20, 25. Let's have a conversation to see what you're thinking. I'm going to pass this on back to Amanda for assessment.
Great. And Sue's still sticking around. She's not going anywhere. We're going to continue this conversation and hear from her. So we have assessment, and assessment for me, I came from a public school background before I went to law school, and it was kind of drilled in with us in public school about assessment. By the time I came into law school and took the role on, it was starting to get to the higher education, in particular law school, this idea of assessment. And the ABA rules around assessment, but you really like the value of backward design, thinking about, as Sue talked about, why are you teaching? What are you bringing to the table? What do you want your students to get out of it? And then going backwards really is powerful, and just as powerful is assessment, the ability to stop, take a breath. I know it's hard, and kind of figure out how to get that data. Did you meet those goals? You're assessing for your students, right? You're thinking about the evaluations, the growth that they have in their placement sites, getting feedback from supervisors, setting up that system. How is it efficient for students? How is it efficient for supervisors? And how does it give you the material that you need to make decisions about your program in the future, and possibly to advocate for changes in your program to your administration? And then feedback from the faculty and instructors. I think it's great for us, of course, as faculty, to give guided, reflective time and to give the students feedback. But for myself, I know I'm thinking about ways to improve the way I give feedback, how to supplement supervisors' feedback, and then how to also give them another perspective, right? Why is it important for them to get multiple feedback? I'm not seeing their work in particular, but I'm seeing how they're emotionally reacting sometimes to the entire endeavor, right? Stopping and taking and asking sometimes questions of them and their reaction. And how do I get that data? And how do I show it to the students? And how does that impact what hopefully their performances or changes in our program? Assessment of supervisors is really important, because you want to make sure, that your supervisors are doing what they're doing. We have an end of semester assessment that we ask our students to complete, both of the program, of us, and of their supervisors and how they were supervised in the work that they do. So not only are we having conversations with supervisors at the beginning in the vetting process, and in the middle in the on-site or in the vetting, the site visits remotely, by the way, now as well, but at that, from the students directly on how their supervision was and the types of things that they did and what they wish they had known that they didn't, or any support that they didn't get. And then, as I mentioned, I think, taking some time to really self-assess us, right? Practice what we preach. I always tell my students to self-assess themselves. So us taking the time to do that, and then figuring out, if we're working with instructors, faculty, or adjunct, how do we get assessments on them and use that? And all of this, right, comes together to help inform our decisions about the program. So we need to assess the program in general. And yes, the program consists of the supervisors, the program consists of the recruitment, the program consists of us and our role and the other instructors. It also consists of, right, the curriculum and what the students are doing and how they're reacting to the different assignments that they have, the different exercises that they're doing, the different classes that they have. So finding ways to put that in, and then thinking and making decisions about the program as a whole. What's working, what's not working, right? What do I need to tweak? I think sometimes the hardest part about this is, one, setting up the system and carving out the time each semester to solicit and review that information. I will say we have some really great people in our community who love assessment and spent time, and there's some great articles. Terry Kelly springs to mind in terms of the work that she's done around assessment. So you can look up some of that. There's regional schools, right, in our area. And one of the things that we can do is assessing how to align expectations. So in Texas, we don't have a consortium, but I'm the only law school in San Antonio, but I am, because of this remote world, and working with placement sites in Houston and in North Texas. So I'm talking to my Houston law people and my Fort Worth and Dallas law people, and really thinking about how we might be able to sort of align our expectations. It's a great way to sort of get together and share some of that assessment and think about how we might change our programs. Assessment can also, right, we need to be thinking about how evaluations have their blind spots, their biases, their pitfalls. We need to be sensitive when we're reading assessments of supervisors or of ourselves or of the students even, right? And I even talk to students about really hearing and thinking about what that assessment meant, and really weighing it, right, in context. So, and then of course, I always start with being open to feedback with our students and really talking to them about the fact that I'm going to ask them for feedback throughout the semester, and I want their honest, open opinion. And I also talk about my self-assessment strategies and how I use that as a teacher. So other important issues that we want to talk about is status. We think it's important because we think, depending good or bad, status has an idea of power that comes with it within the law school. For example, I am not a faculty member or a tenured faculty member, non-tenured faculty member. I'm not a clinical faculty member. I am considered just staff at my law school, but I am the director of externship, and I do a lot of the administrative work and most of the teaching that goes along with this program. So I think that status, while it might annotate some power, it doesn't necessarily accurately reflect the power you have within the program. But I think it's important to think about that and think about where you sit. And if there's any changes, you might want to think about sort of having that be a little bit different. So I don't know where you all are, but I'd love if you shared that. You know, that might be something that you're thinking about. Maybe that's something that you talk about within your small groups. Delegation. I've shared a little bit about how we delegate things. I think it's really important to think about resources. We're often wearing so many hats, not just in our personal or professional life, but also our personal life, and trying to get things done. How can we be efficient and effective? What else are we doing, and can we take on, and how can we manage it all, and how do we focus on those things? And that often you might want to think about bringing on admin, bringing on TAs. How do you advocate for that? I think a lot of that is using your assessment, your feedback that you're getting, and building those relationships. And so that ties into the resources. Do you have enough resources to do, to meet your goals, right? To have an effective program that you think is helpful for students? If not, then ask yourself what you need and who are the people that can help you get it, right? And building that relationship with them and thinking about what they need to see in order to help you get those resources. So, you know, we think it's important for you to, you know, think about faculty status, and some of the locations where you sit is another thing. The program location in terms of, are you within career? The OCS office, I am not with our OCS office, but I work very closely with them and have regular meetings with them. And we are both in contact with our supervisors. Are you within the clinical realm? And I'm within the clinical realm. Are you within student services? I think all of those things have a different perspective, right? And different resources and different things, focus that you might be thinking about. And then building the support and allies within the faculty is something that we've highlighted throughout all of this. So we think it's important for you to take some time. Sue, did you want to say something about that?
Well, I think Amanda's being kind and gentle, and I'll just put one sentence to each of these. Status. I mean, externship folks are like 10 years, 20 years behind clinical, in-house clinical folks. So, you know, we have some battles to wage, right? Like what we do is real and important. And I like to think of myself as sitting somewhere between maybe career services and in-house clinics. Like, I just feel like we are where the rubber, I don't know, like I feel like we're where the rubber hits the road for a lot of our students, like where they're going to see what does it mean to really be a lawyer. And that's a really important thing in law school. So I think that I'll take this on, that we need to do a better job making clear how important and central our programs are, and use our students to help us make those cases. So, and I think status is it's a real thing, right? Delegation. I know Amanda's talking within her program, but I'm meaning, I cannot tell you how many externship people I talk to are like, I'm also the dean of students. I'm also in my career services office. I'm also running my pro bono program. I mean, this takes time. And if you want to like have conversations about how do I build that, I got hired as the first full-time externship person at Berkeley. That was a battle. It was not an easy, like they were gonna like, we just need a part-time person. We don't need anybody. So, these take time, and it took me 10 years or so, about 10 years to advocate for a full-time admin person. So, and I only do externships. Like that is my 9 to 5 bread and butter, what I get paid for job, and everything else is on top of that. And then resources, none of us have enough resources. I can't think of one externship program in this country that has enough. So you are not alone in thinking you don't have enough. But I don't know that we've done an especially effective job advocating for those resources. Last semester, I finally went to my dean and I said, I can't keep running classes of 30 students. That does not make sense in externships. And his response was, okay, how many should be in a class? And I was like, 12. And he's like, great. Anything over 12, start a second section. And I was like, really? Because I've been losing sleep over that for like 5 years. So, one is we have to remember to ask, but two is, ask around, like what makes sense, what's going to help you work with your program. And I know I'm a little bit of a like tiger bear about this, but like, I think what we do is really important. Students tell us it changes their lives and it helps them. And, I just think we are doing them and our schools a favor by really advocating for these programs.
And I will put a point there, an exclamation point on it's changing their lives and it's important. And this relationship part, if, you know, I've been thinking about how to work with OCS on their grad survey and identifying my externs and where that post-grad connection can be made from their externship, and having conversations just, you know, when I'm thinking about marketing and social media, because we have to do our own recruiting of students, which, you know, faculty don't generally have to do that, but another job for us. Thinking about the social media marketing aspects, we're getting, you know, those stories from students and alumni, and then connecting that with what my students have put in their grad survey and the jobs they've gotten post-grad, and how that connects to what they did in externship and the network, you know, the support system, the network, the people they met there, and how it started. That could be great sort of fodder for all of this advocacy that you want to go through with the administration. So, you know, another sort of point for take the data, find ways to get data, find ways to work with the different departments that are already doing that work. OCS is already asking them about their post-grad work, like figure out how to share with them and think about, you know, where that goes. OCS is already working with them in other places and asking them specifically about their jobs and things like that. So, you know, thinking about that work. I think that's a really just that assessment point and the data and using that to your advantage. So I will end there with you. We are not alone. You are not alone. We are here for you. We're a big community. We're so excited. Here's the CLIA externship co-chairs. June and Carrie are great. Please don't hesitate to email them if they're closer to where you are. You want to connect with them, do that. Email Nira and I, we're happy to connect. Sue, I know, although is not a co-chair listed here, is a former co-chair and would be happy to do that as well. So please, questions.
And we have a few minutes, so please, I don't think there are any unanswered questions in the chat, but please speak up. It's a small group and you know, all questions are good questions. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for this presentation. It was super helpful. I just joined UGA Law School's criminal defense practicum. So I'm in a pretty privileged position where I only direct a program that's placing students in public defender offices. And because everyone is doing similar work, I've really struggled with how much sort of substantive law and doctrine I should incorporate in the seminar versus all of this other stuff that I'm learning about as a new clinician. I'm coming directly out of practice. I was a public defender in Atlanta for 11 years. And for the last 6 years, I was doing statewide training for young public defenders, but I realized that law students are different. So I was wondering if you have any insight. I know that externship directors, where you have students who are in all different types of placements, have different sort of restraints on what you can do, and sort of any suggestions on how to balance the skills and the doctrine versus some of like the professional identity stuff and the self-reflection.
Let me throw out a radical idea for y'all. There are a small number of schools that use their class component to meet their school's professional responsibility requirement. So that's something that, because we were struggling at Berkeley to find, like, the students are like dying sitting in this like rule 6 point, you know, like, and we really wanted to think about doing PR in a much more kind of integrated, contextual, like what's happening ethically out in the world. So Elizabeth, I just throw that out as one idea. I know like some schools go for it, some don't. Ours was eager because it meant another way students could meet that PR requirement. But our criminal law ethics seminar, which is the class component to criminal law placements, meets PR. And so they dig real deep on criminal law ethics. And what I love about it is that there are PDs and a few DAs sitting in this room really fighting out, like, I can't believe the DA asked that question, or that DA is a racist, blah, 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 blah. And the PD, you know what I mean? Like, so they, and, you know, they do role reversal stuff. I mean, they really get to dig deep. So, and the other way I'd answer your question is just to say, I would look around your curriculum and I would say, you're probably not going to want to let go of like some some substantive teaching in that class because that's your heart. That's what brought you to this. But maybe you can balance it, right? Like I bring in a public defender from Santa Clara County who's doing major felonies. She's been there 15 years. She is Ms. Mindful. She's a mindful teacher. They have a group at Santa Clara County doing mindful work. So I bring her in to talk about how she made her way, how she does this work every day, and then to talk about like how she brings mindfulness into it. So I would really use it to like, what's not happening at your school? What can you serve? How can you serve these students? And always bringing in their experience out in the field in a very anonymous way, but like, you don't want them talking about clients, but you do want them talking about like, how are they holding this, right? Because this system is not right. And we all know that. And then what are they doing about that? Like, right? Like our friend Lexi at Denver will tell you, like, how do I get my students to figure out what the next criminal justice system should look like? That's the goal of her program.
Mhm. Thank you so much. Also, I love the Santa Clara Public Defender's Office. I've had an opportunity to collaborate on some stuff with them, and they are such an incredible group.
So we have maybe time for one more very quick question and a quick answer. All right,
Well, if not, I'm going to add one more thing to
please
Elizabeth
do.
really quickly. So,
Take it home. Yep.
for me, what Sue said in terms of figuring out what's not being taught in the law school, thinking about what your criminal law class or criminal procedure class aren't teaching, filling in some gaps there, because I know I hear a lot of times from the doctrinal faculty, I can't teach it all. So filling in those gaps might be a conversation you have, and it's a great way to start that relationship if you don't have it with the doctrinal faculty member there or members. We're having a criminal faculty shortage on our end, so I just had one. So we have, the other thing is using your backward design, thinking about what the students are going to be doing and going backwards and thinking about what do they need to know at different points. And then even if you're bringing in the substantive stuff, take a minute to pull out for a second instead of going into the logistics, and just in every sort of lesson, take a minute to pull out. And, depending on, you're doing client contact, thinking about depositions, whatever that is, how did it feel if you're doing a mock, or, how did it feel to sort of do that? What kind of preparation was involved? How much did you think it took to sort of get that together and prepare it? And then how do you think the client felt? How do you prepare them for those emotions? And then for yourself, thinking about, what you need to do in terms of getting everything done for yourself emotionally, dealing with the stuff that's happening with your clients and the frustration that's often happening no matter where you are, DA or PD, right, with those things. So taking a step back and pulling it back from the logistics every chance you get, right? And asking not just what you're doing, but how are you doing it all?
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. It's we're at the end of the hour, and we appreciate you coming and all of your attention to this topic. And thank you, Sue. Thank you, Amanda. Quick round of applause, and everyone go enjoy lunch before the small groups start, or breakfast.
And thank
if you're
you,
on the West
Chris
Coast.
Ann. You're so great.
Yes.
And Chris Ann is a great advocate and person to work with too. She runs the program at the Child Advocacy Clinic at Harvard, and she's a great resource too.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.